What's up, everybody? Welcome into yet another edition of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein, and for clarification purposes, the guy on the line with me right now was offered a contract by the New York Knicks in both the summers of 2018 and 2019, but he declined and offered to play in the NBA to continue doing this podcast with me. Ben McDonald, ladies and gentlemen. Ben, how does it feel to be in the same company as Richard Jefferson? Oh, wait, they didn't offer him a deal. My bad.
It feels good. This is a great story. It's amazing how the Knicks have become the punchline of the league. I mean, if there's a battle for New York right now, it's like a first round knockout. I mean, it's not even close. You've got KD and Kyrie on one side, and on the other side, you've got Richard Jefferson making jokes. So,
But that's the thing, Ben. It was a joke. I was watching that Nets-Knicks game on Sunday night, and he was just making a joke like, yeah, the Knicks called me. They were the only team to offer me a job, but I said I'd rather retire than play for them. And then the Knicks let like 20 hours go by, and they put out that tweet and said, for clarification purposes, we did not offer Richard Jefferson a contract in either summer. Like, are you kidding me? This had already blown over, and the Knicks made themselves even more so the butt of the joke. Don't you agree?
yeah, it was really funny. It's so classic Dolan. It's just great. I you can't you really can't make this stuff up at this point that the Knicks felt like they had to defend themselves against Richard Jefferson's quote and make it into a bigger news story was just phenomenal. Just really Knicks doing Knicks stuff. You
Well,
you just gotta love it.
I know we're not in a binding contract here on Baseline Jumper, but you are a free agent in the summer of 2020. If the Knicks come calling again, do you know what you're going to do? I don't want to put you on the spot here.
Oof. This is a tough decision. There's a big opportunity there. Can play a lot of minutes, but Jason, the baseline jumper has been my home, and I really feel like I've built a family here. I've been doing a lot in the community, and I think I'm gonna keep my talents here on the baseline jumper.
Whew, I can exhale now. I was going to have a very miserable Thanksgiving if you didn't answer that question the way I was hoping you would. So, 102 episodes in, glad you're still riding with me, buddy. But there's a lot of big news stories circulating around the NBA here as we head into Thanksgiving week. We're in the middle of Thanksgiving week. But there could be some potential changes coming to the schedule. And I know this is really broad right now. There are a bunch of things that have been discussed, an in-season tournament, which I think is completely dumb. There's, lowering the amount of regular season games to 78, potentially starting the season earlier to limit back-to-backs and reduce the chances of load management. I mean, I get that the league is working on trying to make things smoother for the players, for the fans that consume the games. But out of all these changes, A, do any of them stick out to you as something you would like to see? And B, do you see any of this actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reduction in games would be really good for a lot of reasons. One is that I think we're struggling to understand the science behind things like load management, but what we know is that guys are essentially playing longer careers than they ever have. And people might say, "Well, what do you mean, Ben? That's silly. Guys like Robert Parrish played, more than anyone." But the difference is that now these guys are playing like they're professionals from the age of 6 years old. They're playing in AAU, they're playing so long for so long that it's tearing up parts of their bodies that never used to be an issue. I mean, now guys' knees are getting blown out when they're in their teenage years because they're being overplayed, and it's resulting in guys by the time they get to the league, they've already played too much basketball. And you can look at the other examples of these guys, and I think a few really stand out. Look at a Giannis. Look at a Steve Nash. Look at a Joel Embiid. These are guys who played basketball later in life, picked it up later, and were able to thrive. I mean, even a guy like Kobe Bryant was a later starter in terms of basketball. I mean, people just assume that because his dad was a professional basketball player that he was a big basketball guy, but in fact, Kobe Bryant was a big soccer player as a kid. And I think it sort of speaks to the fact that now these NBA players, they by and large are just they're struggling to play in a game that demands so much, and it's either reducing the number of minutes they play, which sort of impacts the product in terms of a night to night basis, or they're just choosing to play a little bit more in these games and then take nights off. And then some of the paying fans and people who are watching the games at home are getting denied the chance to watch the best players play at the highest level. And so by spacing that out, less back to backs, I think it's a good idea. I think it's going to improve the product, and I really think that it could be good for the league and good for the ability to keep growing the game and good for us as viewers because frankly 82 games is too much anyway. I mean, I don't need
Really,
82 games of basketball. I don't.
really, lowering the regular season by 4 games is going to solve this issue? No, it's plain and simple for me, Ben. Start the season at the beginning of October, like the NHL does. I mean, if you start training camp in early September, say week 1 of the NFL regular season, right around when hockey starts, because if you notice, the hockey regular season ends right around the time the NBA regular season ends. However, there's more days in between games, guys rest, and you don't see load management going on in the NHL. So if you just start the season earlier, you have less back to backs, less need for load management. The schedule makers can work out the primetime schedule to where stars are not resting during marquee matchups, and problem solved. Because I think if they tried to do an in-season tournament, what are they in college? I just think that's stupid. The one thing I do like though is potential playing games with the bottom 4 seeds. So if you say 7 to 10 in the East and Western conferences all qualify for the postseason, and I'm using air quotes, and you have them play a small play-in tournament, and then the 2 winning teams from there are the final 2 seeds in each conference. See, that makes sense. But I don't think shortening the season or doing an in-season tournament is going to solve any of these problems.
Well, I think one thing, the hockey example, I've heard other people say that, and it's a great point by you because it's true. There's things you can take there. I think one thing though that we also have to be really cognizant of is the way that hockey is it functions and the way that guys play because they don't play as much. I mean, you look at guys on a team, I mean, a lot of the hockey players only play, 20 minutes a game. And that's not the way that the NBA is driven. Guys, the truth in our heart of hearts is we would rather see the star players play 35 minutes a game, Jason. I mean, that's what people really want to see. They want to see the best players play more of the game. And I think you're right. I don't think 78 games is going to make a big difference. I think you're right. They should start sooner. Personally, I'd like to see more in like the 60 some odd game range. I think that would make for a really fun season. I think it would mean that guys are going to be playing more. You could shorten the season a little bit. You could start it a little bit later than you do now. You could still finish it in time. It wouldn't overlap as much with the NFL season. Because right now, to me, I think the ideal would be to start the season closer to Thanksgiving and have a much shorter season
I
where
can't wait that long.
the thing is, this is where the NFL starts to kind of drag down. A lot of teams are out of the playoffs if you're a Jets fan or a Dolphins fan, and all of a sudden you're kind of losing interest, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, wait, there's basketball again, and then the good basketball comes right as the NFL is ending, and then all of a sudden it's the playoff push. March and April are really exciting, and then all of a sudden it's the playoffs, and then everyone's watching. So I think there's a lot to be done here. I don't know. Your point about the play-in tournament is a great one. I mean, that's going to be really fun. I don't know about the midseason tournament either, but one thing to consider here, Jason, before we move on. I do wonder if this midseason tournament is a way to emulate the Champions League and some of those tournaments that are taking place in European soccer and a way for the NBA to slowly grow the game internationally because some of those games in those in-season tournaments could start to include international leagues. And then as those leagues grow, you could have a chance for the NBA to sort of cross-pollinate, to get some synergy across those other leagues and help expand the game around the globe and create more of a global audience because imagine that NBA teams were playing against the winners of the NBL in Australia, for instance, and some of the other leagues. I mean, obviously at the beginning, the NBA is going to crush those teams, to be quite honest. But over time, if those become more interesting, you could get viewership from countries around the world as a sort of mini FIBA Cup. And this is something I know Mark Cuban and some of the people in the league are really interested in getting the NBA to be a bigger force in international basketball.
Look, I think shortening the season would not be beneficial because the league is marketed as a year-round sport because you have the season pretty much from September through June, free agency in July, and then most August you have either the Olympics or you have a World Cup tournament or something along the lines of what you were saying. I don't think integrating an international game in the regular season would work because you have a lot of these preseason tilts with the NBA taking on, teams from, Bosnia or something like that. But during the season, I think it's the NBA against the NBA. That's what makes the league, as healthy and strong as it is. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's not broke. What it all boils down to, Ben, is that we are in the era of analytics and all these numbers and stats that show how tired guys are. You mentioned Robert Parrish at the top of the show. Those guys didn't have that type of technology. LeBron James is probably the last guy from the old guard that is at his age, 35 going on 36 or 34 going on. He's born in 84. Yeah, he's going to be 35 years old. I'm bad at math. That's why I'm a journalism major. But he's probably the last guy you're going to see playing such a heavy load of minutes. We're never going to see that again. It's just the changing of the times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is whether that's good or not. But at any rate, we've talked plenty about the scheduling and who knows what's going to happen. Some good news for the schedule, Jason, and we'll just do a quick hitter here. But Kemba Walker had a scary neck injury. He kind of knocked into his own teammate, kind of went headfirst into him. It looked bad. He got stretchered off. But the good news, Jason, well, maybe not for you, but the good news for everyone else is that he's going to be back Wednesday against your beloved Nets. Thoughts on the injury and thoughts on Kemba's season so far?
Well, first of all, it is good news. I want to play, if I'm a Nets fan, which I am, I want to play against the best players. The Nets have just beat up on four of the worst teams in the league. And I wouldn't say beat up because two of their wins were by 2 points, but we'll get into the Nets later. It's good for Kemba. He's been one of the best players in the league in the early portion of this regular season, got that big contract in Boston. And that was a scary injury. And by the grace of God, everything worked out. Missed a couple games, but he's probable against the Nets on Thanksgiving Eve. So you have to be thankful for that. And thank goodness it's not more serious, really, because, before they announced that he should be back tomorrow, I was getting ready to say, well, how much time is he going to miss and how will the Celtics fare long term without him? The good news, Ben, is we don't have to have that conversation because Kemba should be back on the court 24 hours from now.
He's also my fantasy team, so I was glad to see that. But someone who might not be back, Jason, is DeMar DeRozan, who has been seen deleting his Spurs Instagram posts, and meanwhile, his teammate Dejounte Murray is unfollowing his fellow Spurs player and the San Antonio Spurs official account. This has led to much speculation that with the Spurs, who currently, as of this recording, are tied with my Chicago Bulls with a 6-12 record for the sixth worst record in the league, Jason, that they are going to make moves, possibly trade those guys. So first I'm going to ask you, Jason, will he be moved? And then should he be moved?
I mean, you've been calling for this since day one of our podcast 2 years ago, Ben. It's time for a rebuild in San Antonio. It's time for Greg Popovich to ride off into the sunset, take his 5 championship rings, his coaching pedigree, right into the Hall of Fame. His work is done. There is nothing more that he can do. And you would have thunk after watching him coach the United States in FIBA that he would come in, especially with Derek White on the team, and have the Spurs team ready to play. If they make the playoffs this year, which is still not out of the realm of possibility, even though they don't look very good at all, it would break an NBA record for most consecutive years making the playoffs, which is, I'm sure, something the organization is striving for. That said, when a few of your best players are acting out like this, that's not the Spurs way. I think if you're R.C. Buford, you are on the phone with GMs round the clock